Today is the day. I'm walking back from my local aquatic store with my new Betta fish. I've wanted to own a Betta fish for probably getting on for 20 years now, and I'm so excited to finally be bringing this one home, even if it is in a not very glamorous plastic carrier bag. Before we can take a look at him though, and add him to the tank, there are a couple of small jobs to be done. Ever since I started getting the tank set up, I've been on the lookout for some moss to add to it. But for some reason none of my local aquatic stores have had any in stock until yesterday, when I managed to get my hands on this little potful. It needs to have a good rinse before it can be added to the tank. It's been growing in this jelly-like stuff, and all of that needs to be washed away before it can go into the aquarium, otherwise it'll leach too many nutrients into the water. Now that it's all cleaned off, I'm going to pull it into separate clumps. In the tank I have an L-shaped piece of wood, which I actually made from two separate pieces of wood joined together at right angles. I tied it together with cotton thread, and where the join is a handy crevice that I can push the moss into. The cotton thread that I used to tie the wood together is also really handy for anchoring down the moss without me having to add any further ties. That plastic ring that you can see is the top off a yoghurt pot, and I use it because I've got floating salvinia on the top of the tank, and it just lets me push any moss or any other plant through the surface of the salvinia without dragging the whole lot down. This type of moss apparently grows quite rapidly, so I'm expecting to have to give it quite regular haircuts to keep it all in shape. While I was at the aquatics choosing my fish, another plant caught my eye, and I couldn't quite resist. I'm always on the lookout for healthy plants, and this one looks to be in perfect condition, so I just couldn't leave it behind. Again, it's just a question of removing it from its pot and taking all of that rock wool from around the roots. The roots look really full and healthy, so I'm happy to put this straight in the tank. When I say in the tank, I actually want this plant to sit on the piece of wood with its roots below the water and its leaves above the surface. There's a handy hollow in the piece of wood that I can just sit the plant in. I don't think I'm going to need to tie it down. We'll see how it grows. I think the Betta fish is going to love being able to hide in amongst all of those roots once they get established. Okay, one final job before we can finally add my new Betta fish. When I first set the tank up, I added a very small amount of floating salvinia, and now it has spread to cover the entire surface of the tank. I'm going to remove some. Betta fish are labyrinth breathers, which means they need to be able to breathe air from the water's surface as well as being able to breathe down under the water. Also, as you can see, from below the salvinia has got quite thick and it's starting to choke itself, turning a bit brown, and if I just leave that there it'll pollute the water. So I'm going to remove some of the worst brown parts of the plant. It'll be good for the salvinia and for the fish. It doesn't look like it, but I've actually removed quite a lot. I'm sure it'll regrow very quickly. So I think it's time we finally take a look at my new fish. I've been keeping my eyes peeled for weeks now, both in all of the local aquarium shops and online, waiting for just the right Betta fish for me. This one is actually one of the first fish that I saw. I initially discounted him because I didn't want a crowntail Betta, there's a clue, and it also just wasn't the colour I was looking for. However, I kept going back and back to him because he was just such a character. Out of all of the Bettas that I saw, this one definitely had by far the most personality, and that's what won me over in the end. And I'm really glad that I chose him. Now I get a closer look at him at home, he really is very beautiful. He's looking a bit pale here because he's stressed from his journey, but he'll soon colour up a little bit more. Before I add the fish, I'm going to give the tank one final dose of Sea Chem Stability. I've been testing the tank water regularly, and all of the water parameters are absolutely fine, bang on where I want them, and they're holding out nice and stable. However, there's nothing wrong with adding one more dose of beneficial bacteria at the same time as adding a new fish. So, it's time to begin the new fish welcoming home ceremony. First up, it's tank lights off, and I can fold this one back out of the way. This gives me more room to float the bag. I've purposely kept the water level in the tank down a little bit to make sure that there's room to float the bag without having a tidal wave of spillage. Let's have a quick look at him. There he is down in the corner. As you can see, he's currently not looking too impressed, but I'm sure he'll soon cheer up. After about 15 minutes, the water inside the bag should have started to have reached the same temperature as the water in the tank. So now it's time to cut the top off the bag and slowly start adding some of the water from the tank into the bag. The water at the pet shop that's in the bag will be slightly different, of course, from my tank water, and rather than just spilling the fish straight into the tank, he really needs time to adjust to his new water parameters. Gradually mixing the two waters together will give him plenty of time to do that. You can see that even after only about 15 minutes floating in his bag, he's started to become much more active, and his fins have even already started to become a little more pinky orange. Another 15 minutes has gone by, so I'm going to add a little bit more water, just the same as I did before. And after yet another 15-minute wait, I'm nothing if not consistent, it's finally time to add Mr. Fish to his new tank. I prefer to scoop out by hand rather than using a net because I just find it a little bit less clumsy. He was really easy to catch and gently release into the water. You've maybe noticed that I've been wearing gloves every time that my hands have had to go into the water. This isn't because I don't want to touch the fish, but because I'm currently wearing nail varnish and I really don't want to risk any of that getting into the water. You might not think it, but it can be so harmful, so better safe than sorry. I've still got the tank lights turned off here. I'll get some better shots later when I can put the lights on. It's better to leave the lights off for at least a couple of hours. It just helps the fish to relax into their new home. As I mentioned earlier, Betta fish need to be able to breathe at the surface of the water. Currently all of the floating salvinia is stopping him doing that, so I'm going to add the top of this clean old yoghurt pot. This will ensure that there's always an area that's free of salvinia. The fish can come up to the surface to get some air. Also, it's really nice to be able to look down into the tank to see what's going on below. I can also use this little window for feeding. Mr. Fish, I think I'm going to call him Cosmo, has been in the tank for a few minutes now. He's starting to liven up and beginning to explore his new home. I expect he's never seen floating plants on the top of his tank before, so he's definitely giving those a good inspection. I'm going to leave him alone for a good while now so that he can settle into his new tank in peace, and I'll come back later and turn the lights on. Cosmo seemed to take the grand illumination in his stride. It's clear to see that this fish is going to be a character. He keeps coming over to investigate the camera. Looking at these shots, I think it's fair to say that I have got a lot more scaping left to do on this tank. But now I can observe Cosmo and how he uses the tank, I think it'll be easier for me to make decisions on how to switch up the planting and any more hard materials I choose to add to the scape. First job may definitely be to hide those cables at the back of the tank. Cosmo's being really inquisitive, making sure to inspect every inch of the tank and also giving his own reflection plenty of attention. But then, he really is a very good-looking fish, so who can blame him? I was really pleased to see that Cosmo found his breathing and feeding yogurt pot window almost immediately. He comes up regularly for a quick mouthful of air before heading off to do another few circuits of the tank. He seems to be having great fun squeezing himself into all sorts of nooks and crannies. In the tank are a good few of these little snails. They must have come in on one of the plants. However, I'm not sure how long they're going to last, now there's a predator on the scene. Now that Cosmo is settled into his new home, I'll be filming short videos every single day so that you can watch Cosmo and his tank develop in real time. Hit subscribe and you won't miss a thing. The Daily Tank, the home of the Daily Tank video.